Here again is Toussaint St. Negritude.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. And thanks all of you so much for being here. I so appreciate it. And I'm glad that we actually managed to split this up in two different locations. And no one got lost. Thanks so much. Okay, so I will begin with some poems from the book here. Before I begin, I want to give a huge thank you and shout out to the illustrator of this cover, which is so fabulous. Iraq, dear friend Iraq, is right here. Yes. Do you want to stand? Stand up. Yes. We've been friends for a long time and have often shared poetry and ideas, and we've long talked about given the traditional difficulty of like getting a book published and not having the $1 million that it often calls for, we had talked over the last, 4 or 5 years about we'll just do one on our own. And we were thinking of maybe using the bread and puppet printer and doing like just a short run. It didn't quite happen yet, but this beautiful thing happened. But in the process of that, Iraq came up with this amazing portrait. I'm just stuttering because it just still amazes me. It's so great to work with an artist, whether it's a fellow musician, a visual artist, or any genre, who knows you so well, or who's so just kind of gets the universe so well that, I could just say, cosmic, voodoo, queer, magical, Black, African diaspora, and boom, there it is. I'm so grateful. Grateful to share this experience. So, okay, I'm going to begin reading, and let's see. I'm going to begin with a favorite poem from the book here called Cosmographies in Bloom. One of the things that has definitely guided me throughout my life as a poet in various different locations, different experiences, different highs and lows of my life. One thing that's always guided me are the stars. I still feel such an amazement with the infinite, hieroglyphics of the stars. That's how the stars seem to me. They seem like a form of text. I'm a writer. I don't know, or music notes. There's a definite message going on up there. We're still struggling to understand it. It would be like writing like a really big note that says, need help, call me now. And the people are just like, what? I don't know, what the fuck is that? So I'm constantly trying to decipher those stars myself. So this is called Cosmographies in Bloom. Down a song flowing north Down, 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 a song flowing north amid the boreal wilderness of innermost transformation appears the realm of the soul-rising mountains, of the moon at dawn. Obliged by the gods, down a song of stars and coniferous splendor, greens the calling of reaches higher, higher, higher than age-old, higher than our shadows can modernly conceive. Down a song flowing north rises the dawn land of illuminations, welcoming the innermost of elevations, welcoming the innermost of elevations to passages of expansions duly received. Behold, such noble means of galactic introspection. Behold, each peak surrounding each surrounding peak upon peak upon peak. Behold, each bewitching reach. Behold, this ascension of irrepressible peace. Behold, your emancipation from all dominions otherwise. For here is where your unconquerable wilderness, your unconquerable wilderness, your unconquerable wilderness glistens in the liberty your passion calls home. Welcoming all illuminations to the dawn land incandescence of innermost reclamations, unshackling the sages from the ages, long now blazing and found, down this song flowing north amid the boreal chicories lining the cosmos from the astral floor, appears the realm of the soul-rising mountains of the moon at dawn. Obliged by the gods of blossoming cosmographies, behold this land, behold this land, behold this land your passion calls home. Okay. Okay. So that poem was, pretty much all of these poems are written here in Vermont and definitely inspired by the landscape and by all of our lives. It's a short poem called That Unnatural Question. By definition of the very word itself, how can any aspect of nature ever be unnatural, irregular, or worse yet, unbecoming? For me and my natural self to be. Okay. One of my favorite things about the appreciation of what we traditionally think of as nature is realizing that I'm a part of that nature too. And all of me is part of that nature, part of nature. And there's nothing unbecoming about being natural. Okay. Okay, this is a poem I wrote shortly before moving to Vermont and encountering when I first moved here, I called the Vermont Welcome Wagon, which was in fact pretty hateful. So I wrote this poem called Why Hate Love? And I don't think there are any children in the room. Okay, there's one. Okay, there's going to be some beautiful language here. Okay. As a person without children, I'm constantly, learning to be respectful of people with children. When I first moved to Vermont and I was doing a performance somewhere and someone asked, can I bring children? Or they asked, is it family appropriate or whatever the term? And I'm like, I moved here when I was 50. Like, I'm a 50-year-old San Franciscan. You're asking me if this is family appropriate? I don't know what that means. But anyhow, all love. So this is called Why Hate Love? Look, fuck all you idiots who just can't grasp the fact that who I love, how I love, and how good that love is ain't got shit to do with you. The world spins forward whether you dig it or not. A globe set in motion is not for backward glances. I am and will be loved irrepressibly, and in conjunction and in return. I shall love most naturally, fantastically, in the light and in the streets. My love is a declaration nothing can defeat. This is a love like all good loves. Dig love, and love shall dig you free. No need to hate the music. Just go on and love your own sweetness, while I go on and sweetly love the love I love, liberally, constitutionally, eyes, ears, lips, body, mind, and soul. Besides, regardless of the fools who beg to differ, this love doesn't give a shit who dares to quibble. This love will kick the ass of denial. This love will kick the ass of denial. Every which way the heart blows. This love is beautiful. This love makes the Louvre lose its speech. This love walks on water and keeps the beat. This love can shine through walls 50 states thick. You can't fuck with this. So why hate love? You better recognize this sweetness. That's what happens when a sassy black queen moves to Vermont. When I first moved here, I thought it was kind of unusual. Like, within the first few weeks, I was meeting people. I was working at Catamount just down the hill, lived just a few blocks from here. And I'd meet people and, say I had just moved here. And immediately the first question would be, when are you leaving? And it would happen over and over and over again, and with smiles. And I'm like, I don't know, Vermont, maybe communication is different here. But yeah, it was interesting. And I'm here now, it's 15 years later, so Glad to have survived. Another response to those that aren't pleased with freedom. It's called All This Grace. And this is another sassy one. Every now and then I kind of get in these sassy moods. I'm so sorry. I know you'd love to hate me. But much to your chagrin, my humanity is just much too much for even you to withstand. I know you'd love to detest my face, but much to your own wretchedly vile disgrace, my badass beauty just keeps shining with every last look you take. I know. How could God create all this grace? Step aside, little world. I'm about to light this goodness from here to outer space. Gold don't spoil for nobody, no matter what they say. And what kind of inspired that last line? I was watching one of those, PBS documentaries, and they had discovered some ancient gold statues that had been like under the sea for, thousands of years. And they pulled them up, and the gold is like sparkling. The gold is like beaming. And evidently, I'm not a scientist or a goldsmith, but apparently that's one of the properties of gold, that it doesn't tarnish. And so gold don't spoil for nobody. Your gold, no matter what they say. So, yeah. Thank you. This is another favorite poem of mine called Brothers and Brothers, celebrating the love between men in all of its forms. It's called Brothers and Brothers. Brothers and brothers, brothers and brothers, brothers and brothers, brothers and brothers in arms of other brothers. Brothers and brothers, brothers and brothers, loving brothers in arms of other brothers, loving brothers. Brothers and brothers, brothers and brothers, brothers and brothers in arms, being brothers, being lovers, being brothers, being mothers, brothers, being mothers, brothers, being sisters, brothers, being rescuers, brothers and brothers and brothers and brothers, being keepers of brothers in love with other brothers. Brothers and brothers in arms of other brothers, brothers and brothers, brothers and brothers loving brothers, brothers of breath and thunder, brothers of breath and thunder, holding the one love that cannot be shut asunder, brothers and brothers and brothers, holding the one love that cannot be shut asunder, brothers of breath and thunder, brothers and brothers breathing life, brothers and brothers breathing life, brothers and brothers loving brothers in arms of other brothers, loving brothers, breathing life, breathing life. Okay. Thank you. That poem, I forgot to mention it in the book here, but that poem is devoted to two dear friends and mentors for me in the 80s and 90s. One, a filmmaker, Marlon Riggs. You might have seen some of his work. His most popular film is Marlon Riggs. Anyone remember the title? Toussaint St. Thank you. It's, yeah, oh, this is a blessed moment. It's so nice to have like minds in the audience who can finish your thoughts. Yes, Toussaint St, and that film also included the poet, God, I'm just 65, I'm not 95. What's his, I'm spacing it. But they, both of them were great poets. Unfortunately, they both died of AIDS, but I had an opportunity to read with them in San Francisco once and got to know them better afterwards. It's not Etheridge, the other poet, I can't remember, but he lived in Philadelphia for a long time. And there's a great collection of queer black poets, and it's called Brothers and Brothers. So that's that there. This is a poem I wrote a few years ago after all of the, it's something when you talk about American culture, there's very little that's lasting. We often talk about historic moments in American culture as incidental. Remember when Black Lives Mattered? Remember when Black Lives Matter was painted down State Street in Montpelier and state capitals and streets all around the country? Remember that? And then, after a while, that window gets closed and that gets removed from the streets. And we go back to just, buying really good lattes for $85. So this poem is called How About Now? When nobody's looking, do Black Lives Matter then? How about now? How about when my mother goes to the doctor? How about when I cross the street? How about now? Do I get to use the crosswalk too? How about when the chickens come home to roost? How about when I've told you to get your hands off me? How about when nobody's looking? Do Black lives still matter then? Even if everybody's still telling the truth? How about now? Okay, so that's there. This is a poem called Climbing Home that really connects with this book. So I grew up in San Francisco, grew up in California. I was reminded the other day, a friend had posted a picture of one of my favorite places in San Francisco, Dolores Park, which is on a hillside, and up at the top of the park, you can see across the city, the skyline, and the hills of the East Bay. I grew up calling them hills, which some are over 3,000 feet, but, you know, I grew up calling them hills. But I was reminded, looking at that photo the other day, that for most of my life, until I moved to the East Coast, everything east of San Francisco was over those hills. Everything was over those hills. And if you look to the west, you know, everything to the west was beyond that ocean, the Pacific Ocean. And there was such a comfort in knowing that, and I think for a lot of us that were there, particularly 70s, 80s, 90s, that we were kind of on a little island of sanctuary, which was wonderful, and it's similar to a lot of our lives here in Vermont, where we often feel that we are in some sort of bubble of sanctuary. And we pat ourselves on the back. Aren't we so lucky to be here? And something that we are starting to finally get wind of here is something a lot of us in San Francisco got wind of over the last 50 years, is that in this capitalist world, sanctuary, a place where interracial couples can live without being harassed, a place where queer people can live and work and function without being harassed, a place where if anyone did have the stupid nerve to try to do anything hateful, it's us against them. And when I was a sassier, cocky, 20-something queen in paradise, I would quickly let tourists know that you can cross that bridge. You can go over there. And I would tell them, that there are 49 other states. If you don't like what we're doing, have at it. Have at it. But of course, now I'm long out of there. But one of the things we realize is that sanctuary costs. Sanctuary has a huge price, and not a healthy price. You're interracial, but you're from Virginia, and people didn't treat you and your partner nicely in Virginia, so you want to move here in San Francisco where you could enjoy the freedom to be? Sure, come on in. It's going to cost you. It's going to be $3,000 a month. Oh, you can't afford that? I wonder why San Francisco suddenly became so white. And now we're waking up to the same reality here. So as I was growing up, I would often hear what I call the can't-dos. You can't be a poet. When I was like 16 and you're supposed to be thinking about college and future, I want to be a poet. You can't do that. You can't be a poet. Certain places that, one of the great things about growing up in San Francisco is that no matter how urban the city is, you're surrounded, visibly surrounded. You can see mountains and nature beyond the city. And I always had a love of nature. And thank God my mother, who I'll also talk about later, my mother so wishes she could be here, and she definitely sends her love. She lives in Houston right now, but I was going to say, people were always telling me what I can't do. And growing up there with my love of nature, I always wanted to visit Idaho. You know, mountains, beauty, nature. I absolutely, someday, it seemed like a million miles away, someday I really wanted to visit Vermont, you know, for the mountains and nature. But the elders that I knew at the time would sit me down. You know, I know you all have heard about the talk that Black parents give their children. And, you know, that talk has a zillion pages because this is America. Can't do this, can't do that, can't do this, can't do that. And I remember being told, like, you can't go to Idaho. You know, Black people aren't welcome in Idaho. You can't be a poet. Can't do, can't do, can't do. So this is a poem, kind of digging into that, called Climbing Home. I have been climbing can't-dos all my life. I have scaled every doubt. This great land of the free has assailed my way, and I'm still here. Scaling every can't-do this old world has to offer. Ain't a can't-do ain't a can't-do high nor lawful enough to keep me from climbing to where or what or who I need to be. I have been climbing can't-dos all my life, and I'm still here, scaling my way to yonder be. Okay. Thank you. I'm really hoping that, you know, we've all heard certain great, very, very, very great writers like James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, talk about their legacy, what they would like to see happen or remain from their work. And, you know, as mortality is becoming more and more familiar, as I get older, I am so happy with this book because I not to be at all performative or maudlin, if I suddenly had a stroke tomorrow and didn't survive, I would be so happy to have this as like my remaining thoughts. And I'm hoping that each of these poems, and though I'm very, very, very intersectional, and this book is intersectionally going in multiple directions, there is an overriding theme of liberation and emancipation, self-emancipation. And I'm hoping that these can help many, 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 many others generations to come. Although, you know, I don't mean to be a spoiler, but I am actually immortal, and I won't. I'm not going anywhere. So Yeah, I've decided just to let it out. That's why I called it Mountain Spells. I'm an immortal. And these are all spells, and that's the truth. These are spells. Okay, this next poem I'm going to do is called I'm Gonna Let It Shine. And I wrote this right during those first few months of the COVID shutdown. As we know, COVID is far from gone. The other day I just Googled, like, how many people have died to date in the United States from COVID? And apparently they stopped keeping records after this past April. And as of April 2024, I don't remember the exact number, but for anyone who thinks COVID is like something in the past, that number will shake you into reality. But I wrote this during those first few months when all we knew was horror. We didn't know where this was going, how worse it was going to get. It's the end of time, end of life. And I, in the most sincere way, really kind of delighted in what I saw as like, this is a golden opportunity. We don't have to go to work. We don't have to drive our cars. We can actually stay the blip home. And greatest of all, we can do what we want. You know, all those days, you know, throughout all of our dutiful working lives, you know, when we're on our way to work or while we're at work and we're doing the mundane, whatever things we do, this is no offense to any coworkers who might be in the crowd. But, you know, for all those days when we might think to ourselves, God, I wish I was home so I could do A and do B, and wouldn't it be fun, and da-da-da. And so that's exactly what I did. And I loved it. Just before COVID hit, I was living in Montpelier and had been working an abominable, awful job as a dishwasher. There's nothing more, I don't know what the word is, about moving to a place who tells you that despite your resume, despite your life experiences, despite your very existence, that the best we have to offer you, black man, is to wash our dishes. And I was incredibly miserable. And of course, rents were rising. And I decided out of the blue, well, there have been a lot of thoughts going into it, but that since it didn't seem apparent at that time that Vermont would open any further doors, that my income would remain at $11 an hour or less, and rents were rising. And I've managed, you know, I've already lived in an extremely expensive city, San Francisco, and always worked full time and managed to somehow, thankfully, miraculously, not be unhoused. And living in Montpelier, I could see the brink. I could, you know, lack of income, rising rents, like the streets were getting closer and closer. So I decided I just kept having this thought This is more poet talk. I just kept having this thought. And you know, part of being a poet, like being any artist, is hearing voices and learning to listen to them. And I just kept hearing this thought that said, you need to build your house. I'm like, you know, what the flip are you talking about? You know, I don't drink now, but at the time, like holding my vodka cranberry, I'm like, what the fuck, what are you talking about? You know, build a house. I've never had any carpentry experience or anything. I had no money, but it just kind of kept haunting me. And I totally got on the wave of tiny houses and devouring, you know, every tiny house video I could find and books from the Kellogg Hubbard Library. And I'm seeing all these creative ways you can build a house. You can chop this book up into 12 pieces and you can build a house. You know, I'm seeing all these, you know, various ways. You can build a house out of pallets. Won't cost you a dime. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. And it was a real leap of faith, as my whole life has been leaps of faith. And, you know, often when we hear the phrase leap of faith, we often just think about the word leap. But the real key word to that phrase is faith. And I've learned that throughout my whole life, and I'm still here. It has never failed me. But I had started to build on my house, and I was staying in a wonderful cabin that I really bonded with. It was really perfect for me at the time. I was really stressed out and not knowing if this was the end of my days in Vermont, where in the world I should go, or what the blip, 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 blip. And I ended up staying in this wonderful cabin that my friend Iraq built, and that was such a refuge. It was a time when I really needed peace, when I had really lost a measure of faith in my neighbors, my fellow Vermonters. And I really needed some seclusion, and I really needed to just kind of work things out on my own. And it was a perfect place. And while I was there, COVID hit, and I was like, cool, you know, let me go take a hike. And because the cabin was like up against a hillside, mountainside, and plain field. And I would just pack lunches and bring my Walkman, bring some Ellington, and go have these wonderful walks. And I wrote this poem here called I'm Gonna Let It Shine. Not knowing what is to come, I stand on the banks of tomorrow, and my soul looks vast and wonders how in the world any other vision could ever be so fine. I stand on the banks of tomorrow, and my soul looks vast and wonders, to which flowing glory shall I rise divine. I stand on the banks of tomorrow, and my soul looks vast and wonders. My feet may be bound by the shores of a current denial, but with this little light of mine, I can fly like a bird in the sky. I can fly like a bird in the sky, not knowing what is to come. I stand on the banks of tomorrow, wondering how in the world any other vision could ever be so fine. So there we go. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to do just a couple more, and then I'll open it up to Q&A. Yeah, okay. This poem is called Rockin' You, and it's one of those poems where you have a conversation with your 25-year-old self, assuming that that was like, some time ago. It's called Rocking You. Dear 25-year-old me, I'm sorry to say I've stepped into the future, some 35 years from now, only to discover that dreams of precious boyfriends fade just as ghostly as affordable housing. And it turns out that America really has no interest in rocking you like a hurricane, but actually prefers the presumed calm of fascism. And apparently, what turns out to be far worse than the presumption of liberty is the absolute absurdity of believing we had ever belonged. Please do believe me, and please do disturb the peace. Okay. Okay, this last poem kind of sums up this whole book and experience. And I know I'm totally being biased here, but there are tons of other great poems in here to enjoy. That would be a feat to do a reading where I read every single poem in the book. But this kind of summed up the whole experience. I wrote this shortly after I finished building my house, which I've now lived in for 4 years. Yeah. This is called How I Built, and my house is called the Star House. And the land that the house is on, I'm a big fan of jazz, of course, as any intelligent person would be. But I'm also a huge fan of the artist Sun Ra. And he, used a lot of wonderful cosmic metaphors. His orchestra was called his orchestra, as in like Noah's Ark. So my land on my deed is called the Arcosphere. And my house is the Star House. Just another hippie in Newark. So how I built my Star House. It started with making poems, seeing the alchemic results of pairing transcendence with the trodden floor, taking the seeds of some way forward and adding palpable visions from a river of things yet to be seen. Building modes of liberation from roads of inner-born means. Then it began to flourish through the making of hats, through the creation of crowns, anointing each vision I grasped, turning poems into high-feathered hats, and with colors of courage and destinies blessed, with the galactic clarity of an incandescent breath, whole poems began to sound from the far outer reaches of a blown bass clarinet. Soon, entire cosmographies of freedom began to speak into being, reap into healing, reach into seeing, freeing into believing, feeling into gleaning my way home. It started with making poems, turning mountains into navigational tomes, finding maroonage upon these high ridge bones of futures, crowning to be shown. It started with making vessels from dreams, forest grown. It started with making the asterism of a drinking gourd into the castle of my very own home. And thus is born the Star House. It started with making poems. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Before we begin the Q&A, and I'm really looking forward to talking with all of you, and this will be followed by refreshments. I want to give a moment for Iraq, if you'd like to come up and say anything, who illustrated this cover.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Toussaint, and it's an honor to collaborate with fellow artists of such galactic magnitude. I brought my sketchbook and I put it on the table with the books, and it has the original illustrations that some are in the book and the cover. And I do believe that we will print some on the letterpress. And I'm primarily, or I do a lot of printmaking. The images are paintings with, they're on black paper with a paint marker, but kind of as a sketch to then become block prints. And so, yeah, that was kind of the idea. One idea that Toussaint and I explored was having these big block prints and broadsheets or chapbooks. And so, yeah, I hope to carve some still and perhaps print them at this new spot in Danville called Hard Press Print Collective. They're having an open house on November 9th, I believe. So folks should check that out right at Joe's Pond. Yeah, it's an honor, and thank you so much for the poetry and the music. Yeah.
Yes. And then Samantha, if you'd like to know.
It's your day.
Okay.
Thank you all for coming. I'm the publisher, but this is Toussaint's big celebration, and I've cried already, so I don't want to get up there.
I can't believe I've held it together. Thank you. Okay, any questions or comments? Yeah.
So this is not a question, but just a comment. From the beginning, the things that I love, or specifically the thing I love about your poetry is that it's like in the Bible when they say, you know, God created the earth. Mm-hmm. But I mean, and we take that kind of somewhat figuratively and you know, speak too many phrases, say too many phrases, and they get lost. The spirit, the love gets lost in all that verbiage. What you do is it down already. And I've often found that to be a gift, so that I can take whatever I write and say, okay, like how would that relate to the way Toussaint repeats phrases, repeats words, and it becomes deeper. The vision becomes deeper through that process. So, anyway,
Thank you.
thank you.
You know, like with the repetition, I don't know if it's particular to African American culture. I imagine it's universal, but I think especially of like, my generation, hearing like some of the older gospel, hearing Martin Luther King speak, and the use of repetition. It was jokingly said that the preachers use repetition, to keep people from falling asleep. But it also works like, listening to blues music, or which uses repetition, or all forms of music, like, oh, I like that, that's the good part, I like that part. And, the repetition of that part really helps to drum the message home. And when I was 19, I left the country and moved to Haiti. It was my first time living out of the country, and just like the calling that called me to like move to Vermont, and so many of like the callings, spells I've had in my lifetime, I was really kind of called to live in Haiti. I had never been out of the country before. I was 19. I was naive a zillion different ways. If there was anyone who wanted to kill or abuse me, I could have easily been dead that first day. I was a naive 19-year-old. Showing up, I had $300 that I had saved from a summer job. I'm sure, it was like, $3 or $4 an hour back then. This was in '79, and moved to Haiti. And one of the things I learned in Haiti, and learning how to speak Creole, which is the language there, Haitian Creole, I learned that Creole, and apparently like a lot of African languages that Creole is derived from, they use repetition to stress a topic. Like in English, where we would say, like, I'm real hungry, meaning I'm real hungry. They would say, I'm hungry. Or if you're really, really hungry, I'm hungry. And that really kind of left an impression with me. So I think that kind of added to my use of repetition. I also love the magical quality. I do think that, I'm sure we all know, that language, just like all human expression, language taps in to some higher powers. Use of language taps into a sort of magic. And I'm sure we could all attest to this when we think of some of our lifetime favorite musicians. Because of the phrasing Duke Ellington used, he's able to evoke elements beyond the explicable. Same with, Marvin Gaye and all sorts of other talents. And so I really kind of tap into that. But the other thing you mentioned about bringing it down, making it concise. In high school, at the high school I went to, there wasn't really a poetry program for anyone wanting to be a poet. I ended up in the journalism department. And in college, I ended up, majoring in journalism. And of course, and it's funny, I don't know if this is true today in teaching journalism, but it was all about concise. Tell it. The house burned down. Tell it. Make it clear. And one of the things, I've always been inspired by listening to people talk, listening to their actual speech patterns, listening to their stories. And in San Francisco, that certainly was, I don't know if it still is now, but it's so diverse where, if you were taking the bus somewhere, packed bus, a few hundred people on the bus, you're hearing all sorts of conversations, and you're hearing conversations in Mandarin, you're hearing conversations in Spanish, you're hearing conversations in Mayan. It was interesting to learn to distinguish between Mayan and Spanish, and various Ethiopian languages and all these different languages. And I really went kind of on a cosmic trip of learning to really appreciate all these different ways that humans express themselves through tone, pitch, and all of that. So, yeah.
So good to see you again.
Thank you. Good to
The
see you.
reading was absolutely incredible. I highly encourage, if you haven't done it, that you do an audio book with your book, because what you get across, it just comes through so much better when you can hear it. So if you haven't done an audio book for your new book, I hope it's in the making.
Thank you so much. Yes, and that has been in the works, and my desire for a long time. And actually, I have, until a couple years ago, I've had a wonderful band, kind of a poetry jazz band called Jaguar Stereo. And it was a duo, me and an upright bassist, a beautiful, beautiful upright bassist named Gaylord DeWald. And a couple years ago, he decided to move to Honolulu. And he's still there. And it's a classic thing of, we're not really broken up, but, But before he left, we recorded an album to meet just that need. And it ended up being a fantastic album. We recorded it over 2 days in a music studio in Burlington, had it mixed, had it mastered. It is ready to go. And our hope at the time was to put it on vinyl. And our thinking initially was, well, let's listen to it and pare it down to what could fit on a record. But when we listened to it and when others listened to it, it was all so good that we decided, well, it must be a double album. And we don't have one album money, let alone double. So unfortunately, and if anyone has any leads on, record companies, definitely let me know. But that's been in the works. But I have to say, it's just funny to hear that, because for years, as I was performing my works orally and musically. After every event, there'd be like a bunch of people coming up saying, "Where's your book? When are you going to have a book? I want your book. Where can I get your book?" And now that the book is here, you want a recording. I'm joking. But hopefully, years ago, to try to do that, I put together a chapbook. I was planning to bring it to just have on display, but in the rush out of the house this morning, I didn't grab it. But I made a chapbook just at Kinko's. This was like maybe in the late 90s. And with, 20 or 30 poems. And in the back of the book, I glued a CD envelope into the back cover and had a CD in there of the poems. And I even, being the perfectionist I am, each poem, I wrote a composition for each poem and played that composition on the bass clarinet. And this was the early days of GarageBand, so it was just me, but I created all these other sounds. And yes, but once I finally had that printed at Kinko's, it was like $15. I certainly couldn't mass produce that. I barely had $15 at the time. But yeah, I would love at some point, maybe because all of the poems on that album are in this book. And so I would love if at some point within the next 12 months, I can get it on vinyl and then be able to sell both of them at the same time. Then people want me to make them hats, so, I'm joking. Anything else? Yes.
The context for this question is that Toussaint and I met over a mutual love of manual typewriters, and have bonded over the years over the typewriters. So my question to you, to the extent that you're willing to give us a peek behind the scenes, is the role that typewriters have played in, because I believe most of them have found their origin in those wonderful machines, and how, where, why, to the extent you're willing to let us peek into that part of your world.
Thanks so much for mentioning that. And I was also planning to bring one of the typewriters. I have 2 typewriters in my car right now.
One, we can bring all 3.
For anyone who doesn't love typewriters or hasn't had the experience, do. It's such a joyful thing. A good part of my early adulthood, and definitely all years before that, was working on typewriters. In my 20s, well into my 30s, in order to get a job. And in San Francisco, and at least in the world I was exposed to, like jobs or like work was downtown in office buildings. That was work. I never knew, I'm sure there were carpenters, I'm sure there were all sorts of other jobs, but the only opportunities I knew of were like in offices. And so applying for a job, the best thing you could have in your pocket was like, how fast can you type? And my mother always amazed me because she actually achieved that 100 words a minute. which I used to just marvel at, and I'd watch her, and she wasn't even looking, she could do it. And when I would apply for jobs, I would do it, but, they would mark you off for errors. And, I did type 60 words a minute, if 30 of them were misspelled. But, so I grew up definitely appreciating typewriters, and even once I got a laptop, and just because of my community of artists, my introduction to computers were MacBooks, and I love them. I appreciate computers, but for serious writing, I still use my typewriter, and I prefer it. And I stress serious writing. Yes, you can write on a computer and pull up YouTube, and then the Gmail, and then suddenly you're not writing. But on the typewriter, that's what it is. It's just like playing a clarinet. You're playing the clarinet. There's no interruptions. And when I first really connected or saw like the real purpose of a typewriter as opposed to writing things by hand was when I was in college. And up until that point, I hadn't really written on typewriters. I'd used them, I owned them. My mother, like by the 70s, had a nice electric typewriter, with the ball, and it was like really fast. I loved it. Had its own correction ribbon. But when I went to college, I bought one of those old Royals that stands like this tall, big, weighs 900 pounds. And I realized that when I typed my thoughts, the connection of getting my thoughts from my head to the page, the connection was a lot cleaner from my head to the typewriter. When I'm writing longhand, I get in the way. My head gets more in the way of like, that's not how you do an L. Or no, or is that how it's spelled? Whereas typing, it's more stream of conscious. And it's still that way for me. And also, in the days following COVID, I kind of fell into this hysteria of like, what if they cut the electricity? So we don't have internet or our laptops, typewriters. And so I've always collected them. I don't have room for them. That's why they're in my car. But I will continue collecting them. I think they're great machines. I love those few remaining things that have been around now for, some hundreds of years, for some items, that have never needed to change, that are still 100% useful, like an umbrella, typewriter, bicycle, 2 wheels and a chain, brakes. I appreciate that. I'm not Republican, but I'm joking, just a little. I'm sorry. I love everybody. But yes, so this was written on one of my typewriters. Yeah.
Which one? No, never mind. I'll ask.
I know, that's why I said one of them. I can't, I'll have to tell you, I think it's a royal, black, I think from like the 30s or the 40s. Yes, any other comments? I love your jacket. Yeah. Any other, yes.
I don't know if I'm going to ask this correctly, but I think you and I can probably fill in my place. Just curious about, I love the self-emancipation thread throughout the book, and I think we have a glimpse of what that means to you, just a small glimpse of it. I'm wondering, because I wondered this myself, I mean, self-emancipation is hard, and it is extremely nuanced, so this is not going to get at the guts of the thought, but what is the benefit in your mind to others self-emancipating, and what will it do for us all in the long run?
Just my opinion, I think it's exactly what we need to do. I think all of us, I think it can be a communal thing, we can help with the emancipation, but the more I've gotten to know myself, as well as others, the older I've gotten, the more I've come to understand that it really does start within. And that whether we have loved ones in our lives who are there to help, or whether we don't, if we're completely isolated and don't have any help, that regardless of that, it comes from within. And you know, we're in our culture, I feel like we're often taught to think of that as a sad thing. Like, oh, you don't have anybody, you know, you have to like fix it yourself. But I've really come to appreciate and realize that that is a blessing. It's not a sad thing. It is a blessing. Who knows you better than you? And yeah, I think, you know, with words like freedom, I don't really ask America for freedom, or I don't ask Vermont for freedom, or the people of St. Johnsbury for freedom. I am free, and I claim it. And anything in the way of that freedom, and there's a lot, I really tried to free it myself. And by saying that, I'm not taking societal things off the hook. You know, there's definitely some responsibility there. But I think real ultimate freedom is from within. So many aspects of my life, I remember feeling that I needed permission. When I first started playing the bass clarinet, like within the year of first playing music, I was incredibly shy, as I am, and incredibly reluctant to call myself a musician. You know, I can't call myself, you know, Coltrane is a musician. I can't call myself a musician. And same with a poet, you know, I can't call myself a poet because I was waiting for some holy moment for someone else to give me that permission. And after some time, sometimes years, with each of these different, you know, aspects of myself, it finally dawned on me, you know, as humans, we can take a long time to figure things out, but it finally dawned on me that, like, mine is the permission that I've been waiting for. And so that's one of the things I'm hoping people can gain from this book is, and particularly here in the Northeast Kingdom, where a lot of people are surrounded by a lot of doubt. You can't do that. You're the Northeast Kingdom. You know, that doesn't happen in the kingdom, ... And, yeah. I hope that answered that. Any other comments or responses? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I am amazed that I haven't cried 1,000 times. You know, I don't know, maybe I'm losing tear ducts or something, but it means so much to have all of you here, all of you, and not only here, but those of you who have known me when and who have known me when I was wishing for this, and knew me when I first completed the manuscript for this. I had put together a chapbook where I had glued the pages on pages and had them in like a glued, hand-bound thing, with hopes that it would end up somewhere. And so I so appreciate this moment, and for whatever the difficulties of our lives, Vermont, our communities, anything, there is also such a depth of love in this community that I have so appreciated time after time again. That really, you know, when each of us get that age-old question from those outside of Vermont, you know, why the blip are you there? You know, when I write friends who live in Austin, Texas, and I'm like, yeah, it's just 12 below today, and they're like, what's wrong with you? This is what's right with me, and sorry. I so appreciate it. I so appreciate all of your support, and please continue it for all of us. And let's keep liberating our lives forward. All right. Thank you.